We are a new unsettling force. You say that?
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are here.
And we are here.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
For liberation.
For liberation.
And we got nothing.
Good afternoon. Good day. This is Reverend Ahmaud Hooker, and I wanted to spend a little time with you talking about issues of justice, issues of poverty, and issues of race. What we want to do now is enter into some dialogue and discussion, but also to catch a glimpse of some statements that have been made both present and past that enable us to see that we have a long way to go in this country when it comes to racism, hatred, and bigotry. It's time for us to rise up as a people and as a collective.
I'll tell you it's gone on
Far too long.
Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on
Far too long.
together, and we won't
Be silent anymore.
Now we're gonna put a little rhythm to this, okay? Okay? But we're gonna speed it up just a little bit. Not too fast. Ready? Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on.
Far too long.
Yes, it's gone on.
Far too long.
Tell you it's gone on.
Far too long.
Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on.
Far too long.
And we won't
Be silent anymore.
Yeah, somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on.
Far too long.
Yes, it's gone on.
Far too long.
Tell you it's gone on.
Far too long.
Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on.
Far too long.
And we won't
Be silent anymore.
Did you hear? Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on.
Far too long.
Yes, it's gone on.
Far too long.
Tell you it's gone on.
Far too long.
Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on.
Far too long.
And we won't
Be silent anymore.
Have you heard? Somebody wants to build that wall, y'all, and it's gone on.
My name is Reverend Ahmaud Hooker. I am your South Carolina Poor People's Campaign Tri-Chair, one of three. Thank God for you being able to tune in and join me today. The South Carolina Poor People's Campaign is a movement to remind the world that the people that are suffering because of poverty did not choose to be poor, have not acted to be poor, but there are systems all around us that are causing poverty, that are causing people to be disadvantaged. And in a country and in a world as good as the one we have currently, there's no reason for children to be going hungry, for seniors to be dying for lack of health care and lack of health access, for people to be living in adjunct poverty. There's no reason, there's no excuse. And as a minister of the gospel, as an evangelical presence in this world who calls on Jesus Christ to do and to move and to have dominion in all situations, I find it a necessity for the church, for the government, for everybody in power to do their darndest to alleviate pain, suffering, and inequality in this world we live in. Thank you.
are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling force, and we're here, a new unsettling force for liberation, and we got nothing to lose but our chains. We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling force, and we're here, a new unsettling force for liberation, and we got nothing to lose but our chains, and we got nothing to lose but our chains, and we got nothing to lose but our chains, and we got nothing to lose but our chains, and we got nothing to lose but our
A powerful new movement is rising across America. From the Mississippi Delta to the Apache stronghold, from the homeless encampments of Washington to the coal fields of West Virginia. We are the 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country, and we are building the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
On June 20th, between the primaries and the general election, we will rise together for the mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington, a digital justice gathering.
Our nation is at a historic crossroads. There are those who say big change isn't necessary or possible, that we are powerless to make our lives better.
But history teaches us that it is exactly in times like these that people from all walks of life must build a broad and deep movement from the bottom up.
On June 20th, we will come together to lift the voices and faces of poverty in the midst of pandemic for a massive, historic online gathering that will embolden us, strengthen us, and prepare us to fight for the kind of society we know we so badly need and deserve.
Rise with us. Visit June2020.org.
Reason why buildings are burning is because this city, this state would prefer preserving that white nationalism and that white supremacist mindset over arresting, charging, and helping to convict 4 officers who killed a black man. That is the reality of what we're dealing with. This is not just a few cops doing things across the country. This is not a good cop versus bad cop situation. This is Ahmaud Arbery being shot down by white men on the streets of Georgia. Breonna Taylor being killed in her home. This is in New York City, where we were until freedom. We were just in New York fighting the police officers who, in the name of social distancing, were damn near killing black young people on our streets. This is a coordinated activity happening across this nation. And so we are in a state of emergency. Black people are dying in a state of emergency. We cannot look at this as an isolated incident. The reason why buildings are burning are not just for our brother George Floyd. They're burning down because people here in Minnesota are saying to people in New York, to people in California, to people in Memphis, to people all across this nation, enough is enough. And we are not responsible for the mental illness that has been inflicted upon our people by the American government, institutions, and those people who are in positions of power. I don't give a damn if they burn down Target. Because Target should be on the streets with us, calling for the justice that our people deserve.
Talk about it, Tamika.
Where was AutoZone at the time when Philando Castile was shot in a car, which is what they actually represent? Where were they? So if you are not coming to the people's defense, then don't challenge us when young people and other people who are frustrated and instigated by the people you pay. You are paying instigators to be among our people out there throwing rocks, breaking windows, and burning down buildings. And so young people are responding to that. They are enraged, and there's an easy way to stop it. Arrest the cops. Charge the cops. Charge all the cops. Not just some of them, not just here in Minneapolis. Charge them in every city across America where our people are being murdered. Charge them everywhere. That's the bottom line. Charge the cops. Do your job. Do what you say this country is supposed to be about, the land of the free for all. It has not been free for black people, and we are tired. Don't talk to us about looting. Y'all are the looters. America has looted black people. America looted the Native Americans when they first came here. So looting is what you do. We learned it from you. We learned violence from you. We learned violence from you. The violence was what we learned from you. So if you want us to do better, then damn it, you do better.
Through the waters, when they find their way to me, I will wade. Through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will walk through the fires when they find their way to me. I will walk through the fires, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know.
So, going back to those white people who have been led to believe that the problem is not Republican politicians who are steering money from public education to the military. The problem is women who are having more children because they want to have more welfare. And that's why the state has less money for them. And so that, I wanted to sort of describe the creators of that idea as distinct from the consumers of that idea. So in other words, like I talked about the producers of these ideas, of this language, of this narrative, producers of racist ideas, and the consumers of racist ideas. So we can first and foremost distinguish and try to understand that in many ways, many people are consuming ideas. And so then the question becomes, why are these people producing these ideas for the mass consumption of Americans? What is the purpose? And then we begin to see that these people are actually producing these ideas to substantiate and justify and rationalize discriminatory policies, and that benefit who? Them. And so, they're producing ideas to mass manipulate people into believing that, no, those policies aren't the problem. Those people are the problem. And so then they won't resist those policies. Instead, they'll spend their time resisting and challenging those people. And so when we sort of think through that, then we can see the ways in which, people have been manipulated. That doesn't mean you're not racist is all. That doesn't mean you haven't consumed racist ideas your whole life, but it also allows you to see how other people were producing ideas that you consumed, that you then believed, that you then acted upon, and they may not even believe those ideas themselves. Yeah. So I mentioned the example of the woman on welfare. There was a report, I think in mid-1980s, written by a Reagan aide. And he said in this report, and I'm paraphrasing him, that we don't have any evidence that substantiates that these women are having more babies in order to get more welfare, but we know it's true. So they, but they wouldn't, they were acting as if this was actually statistically true. They were creating these narratives because it benefited people to drive against welfare so they can then take that money and continue to cut taxes for their benefactors, right? And so I'm just sort of talking about, I think we have to have a more sophisticated sort of analysis of language and narrative making, and who's making these narratives, who's making these terms, and this is, I think, what Brittany was talking about.
Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear? Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Have you heard? Somebody wants to build that wall, y'all, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. Just your voices stop clapping, and we won't. And we won't be silent anymore. Last time, all together. And we won't be silent anymore.
We don't need Democrats saying that they can't even fight before they that something can't be before they even fight for it. I have great respect for Speaker Pelosi. I believe she's been summoned by history, but this past week when she was asked, you don't expect me, she was asked about health care, and she said, you don't expect me to change the health care system in the middle of a pandemic. Yes, we actually do. We actually do. Mercy says you would, because when did we change slavery? In the middle of the Civil War. When did we change Jim Crow? In the middle of Jim Crow. When did we change Social Security? In the middle of the Great Depression. You change things when they need to be changed. And right now, we need to change from this unmerciful approach to public policy to mercy. We don't need compromise, we need mercy.
We're talking about history because we have to change the narrative. There's a narrative that explains how we got here. Mass incarceration was created by policy decisions. We decided to deal with drug addiction and drug dependency as a crime issue rather than a health issue. We didn't have to do that. But the reason why we didn't do that was because of a narrative, and there's a narrative of fear and anger out there. Politicians want you to be afraid, and they want you to be angry, and I will tell you that you can't do justice rooted in fear and anger. To do justice, you've got to get past fear, past anger, and believe things you have not seen. I don't believe we're free in this country. I don't. You see, there's a smog that's hovering in the air. It's a pollution created by our history of racial inequality. We have not done the things that we need to do, and we're not free. It doesn't take much to create conflict, and we've got to change the narrative. We've got to talk about things we haven't talked about. We've got to talk about the fact that we are a post-genocidal society. There was a genocide on this continent. When white settlers came, they killed millions of native people. It was a genocide where famine and war and disease destroyed a whole culture. And there are things you have to do to recover from genocide that we haven't done. And because we didn't deal with that, we created this narrative of racial difference that allowed us to tolerate slavery. The great evil of American slavery was the ideology of white supremacy that we made up to legitimate the way we treated people of color. And we didn't deal with that. And we've got to deal with what it's turned into. We had this era of lynching and terrorism. From the end of Reconstruction until World War II, people of color were terrorized, pulled out of their homes, lynched, burned alive, taken from jails, hanged, shot. And we've got to tell that story. When I look at this country, I look at a country whose demographic geography was shaped by terror. The black people in New York, in Boston, in Cleveland, in Chicago, in Detroit, in Los Angeles, and Oakland didn't go to those communities as immigrants looking for new economic opportunities. They came to these communities as refugees and exiles from terror in the American South. And there are things you're supposed to do for refugees that we didn't do. And that turned into this era of segregation. For decades in this country, we had segregation, and segregation was brutal. White and colored weren't directions, they were assaults. And we haven't done the things you're supposed to do to help recover from those assaults. We should have committed ourselves to a process of truth and reconciliation in the 1960s, but we didn't do that. And because we didn't do that, now we are suffering from a presumption of dangerousness and guilt. And we have to deal with it. We've got to change the narrative, and we can do it. But we've got to understand what we're doing. If you go to Germany today, you can't go 100 meters in Berlin, Germany, without seeing a marker or a stone that's been placed next to the home of a Jewish family that was abducted during the Holocaust. The Germans want you to go to Auschwitz and Birkenau and reflect soberly on the Holocaust. But in this country, we do the opposite. We don't talk about slavery. We don't talk about lynching. We don't talk about segregation. We're not talking about this presumption of dangerousness and guilt. And we've got to change the narrative.
Until the killing of black men, black mother sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mother sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. And that which touches me most is that I had a chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can shed some light.
Current justice movements have to connect the historic Christian faith to their actions for a lot of different reasons. Number one, we have to have some transcendent sense of morality and ethics, right? We can't just come up with this sense of right and wrong individually, because we're going to be in conflict with each other all the time. What Christians do is they say, here's the word of God, so here's how the creator of reality says things should work and function. And so we're going to follow God's lead in terms of judging what is right and what is wrong. And then we're going to follow his lead in terms of how to pursue that. And so we love our enemies. We don't hate them. Fannie Lou Hamer said, echoing the Bible, I don't see how someone can hate his fellow man and expect to see God. And that's a Christian principle. It dictates not only what we do in terms of justice, but how we do it, in the spirit in which we do it. Also, because fighting against injustice, fighting against the idols of this world and the evil in this world, it will kill you if you don't have a reservoir of strength drawn from the Holy Spirit indwelling you, because you're connected to God through faith in Jesus Christ. And so we have in the church and in our faith the supernatural strength to fight against our enemies, which are not flesh and blood. They're principalities and powers and spiritual forces in the heavenly places. And so you got to fight fire with fire in that sense. You've got to have spiritual power to dismantle spiritual strongholds. And so that's what current justice movements need to be aware of.
Right now in our history, we are more divided than I have seen. I know that we have been divided before, but in my lifetime, we are quite divided. And what discourages me is when I hear Christians speak about race and racial reconciliation with no hope. I've seen people say that there is no hope for change, that there is no way that people can change. But if the gospel is true, if we believe that the gospel is true, then there is hope for change. There's hope for the person who is racist. They can change. There is hope for our church. We can be united. Will there continue to be a struggle? Yes, until Jesus returns, we're going to struggle with this, but there is hope. And I pray that our Christian church, that people who are Christians will proclaim this hope, proclaim the hope that is in the gospel. So that is what discourages me. But what encourages me is that I am seeing more and more people talk about this. I see people who have never, ever considered, what does it mean that all people are created in the image of God? What does that mean? What does it mean that Jesus tore the veil of hostility and that we can be united? What does that mean? What does that not just mean for the church, but what does that mean for me personally? And that brings me hope and great encouragement to see that people who have not considered these topics and what it means from the scriptures, that from Genesis 1 all the way through Revelations, God is addressing this topic, that God is creating a people for himself, and he will one day we will see it. We will see this fulfilled, this desire in our heart for unity that we see in the gospel. We'll see it fulfilled, and people are talking about this. That encourages my heart, and I hope it encourages you too.
There is no such thing as race. None.
Really?
There's just a human race, scientifically, anthropologically. Racism is a construct, a social construct, and it has benefits. It has money can be made off of it, and people who don't like themselves can feel better because of it. It can describe certain kinds of behavior that are wrong or misleading. So it has a social function, racism. But race can only be defined as a human being.
If the racist white person, I don't mean the person who is examining his consciousness and so on, doesn't understand that he or she is also a race, it's also constructed, it's also made, and it also has some kind of serviceability. But when you take it away, I take your race away. And there you are, all strung out, and all you got is your little self. And what is that? What are you without racism? Are you any good? Are you still strong? You still smart? You still like yourself? If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem. And they should start thinking about what they can do about it. Take me out.
I'm a movie person, but I always go to see movies that aren't they're just fantastic kind of, cinematography stuff. I don't want reality because I deal too much with reality. So I deliberately went because I at this particular time, it was King Kong. My fault, I own it. I go to see King Kong, and the only reason why, of course I had seen it, the earlier versions, but the cinematography for this new one was phenomenal. All the mechanics and all the new stuff. King Kong was doing all kind of amazing stuff. So I decided I was gonna go. So I'm in, I don't know, at Baltimore, I don't know where I am traveling, and I'm with this friend of mine named Dennis. So we go in. I didn't realize the movie was 3 hours. First of all, I had to go to the bathroom when I got in. So I had to get out. And so I'm trying to figure out when during the movie do I run out. So I decided it's a big bug scene, Jurassic bugs. I don't like little bugs, certainly don't like big ones. So I decided this is a good time to run out. So I run out, and as I'm running out, this is like the first day opening, so it's like 5 theaters of King Kong. So this guy runs out with his son, white man, he's like mid-30s, and he's got this son, looks about 8 or 10. So they're running out, and I'm going, whoa, that was out of control, the bug scene. He goes, oh boy, was it. I said, yeah, that was clearly the worst part so far. So the father runs in, but his son stops and goes, yeah, I didn't like those black people. And I'm going, why me? Is it me? Do I have like a sign on me, right? And then the kid runs in the bathroom. So I go back in the show and I say, tell Dennis what just happened. And Dennis falls out laughing. He goes, Joy, this only happens to you. And I'm going, but because there's a scene where and here's the thing about it. This is so amazing about the scene. There's a scene of cannibals, but they're not black people. They're all kind of people. And right now they got to be politically correct. So you had Asians, and they zoomed in so you could see even the main character was a blonde woman with blue eyes. But they physically were all black, even though they represented different ethnicities. Because, they couldn't have all black people, and they're not in, this age. So, but the little boy, he couldn't see that subtlety. So I'm sitting there, now I'm upset because I couldn't process. And Dennis goes, Joe, you can't process this. It's over, it's done. There are thousands of people. You're never going to be able to fix this, right? So I'm sitting here, I'm messed up for the rest of the movie. So the movie is over, we walk out, and there are droves of people coming out. And who do you think is standing there leaning on the rail? Was this man and his son. And I say, Dennis, this is He goes, no way. I said, yes, Wade, that's him. So I walk over to the man and I said, do you remember me? He says, yeah, you ran out during the bug scene. Well, they were waiting for the daughter to come out of the bathroom. That's why we were waiting at the room. I said, can I ask your son something? He says, certainly. So I say to the little boy, I said, now that you've seen the whole movie, because, King Kong bites it in the end. I'm figuring that's pretty bad. I said, what do you think the worst part of the movie was now? He goes, those black people. And his father goes, whoa, I'm sure. Well, yeah, they were. He was so the father. I said, listen, I know your son's not a Nazi. Don't worry about it. That's not what the issue. And the son runs off. I said, the issue here is that they weren't all black people, but that's his image. Because you see, it wasn't the monsters that were horrific. It was those people were. And that's the image in his mind. And he's so young, he couldn't see that there were actually different groups of people as those cannibals. He only saw black people. And his father, you could just see, was tortured. He says, I don't know. This problem is so big. I don't know if we can ever make it right. And I said, you see, now we're having another conversation, he and I. He goes, it's just so big. I don't know if we can make it right. I said, perhaps. I said, I have to believe that we can. And so his daughter runs out, and now he has a son and his daughter, and he's disturbed, though, you can tell. And he's walking away, and Dennis looks at me, and I look at Dennis, and he gets to the escalator, and he stops, and he takes both of his children, and he turns around, and he walks back to me, and he says, but I will make it right with them, because I can make it right with them. You see, that's where the healing began.
We can never achieve racial justice. No one should accept the legacy of racism can be disrupted. It is possible that racism is inevitable, so don't try to change it. It is a lie that people from different racial groups can get along with one another. Believe our society will collapse from diversity. It is ridiculous to think that stereotypes and prejudices are learned so they can be unlearned. I tell you this, racism is inevitable. It is foolish to presume that there's hope in our future. This will all be true unless we reverse our patterns of thinking and acting. There is hope in our future. It is foolish to presume that racism is inevitable. I tell you this, stereotypes and prejudice are learned so they can be unlearned. It is ridiculous to think that our society will collapse from diversity. Believe people from different racial groups can get along with one another. It is a lie that racism is inevitable, so don't try to change it. It is possible that the legacy of racism can be disrupted. No one should accept that we can never achieve racial justice.
church now has no traditional doors. Even though I'm inside the church right now, the doors are closed, but the doors have been opened wider than they ever have before. The church has no traditional doors because of the pandemic. We have no fences. We have been locked out of our building. But since we can't lock people out, it is becoming and forcing us to become more dangerous as a church. Let me break it down this way. No doors means we are an open door church. There are no ushers now in your house, or deacons or elders or preachers looking you over to determine if you fit a particular criteria. No one is saying that you took my seat, and no one is saying you got to sing this song or that song. None of that at all. All the things that do not matter. Jesus said, I am the door and I am the gate. And is it not strange that in this peculiar moment that God seems to be using this moment so that the church can actually be the church? We got hung up on the doors, locking the doors and keeping people out of God's space, and God ends up closing the doors and opening them at the same time. Jesus never said, I'm a locked door. And here is the good news that I want you to know that this scripture is speaking of, that this metaphor, this idea of Jesus being a door, because Jesus is saying, I'm not like the door you think of. I don't have a bolt and a lock. I'm a door that's always open. I'm a door that will open you to new possibilities. You see, a church with open doors is a dangerous place, because we will be ostracized by a world that is comfortable with exclusivity, separation, hierarchy, and brokenness. But this is a space where we all fit through this door. I like the way that our ancestors say it, that our God is so wide you can't get around God. Our God is so low you can't get under God. Our God is so high you can't get over God. You might as well go through the front door. And I'm here to let you know that this is a space where everyone has a seat at the table. This is a space where everybody can fit through the archway of this door. This is a space, whether you are ghetto or you hang out with people from the country, you have space here. This is a space where suburban sits with urban. This is even a space, whether you're savage, classy, bougie, or ratchet, you are welcome up in here. Jesus is the door. And we can all enter through the door, not because God's love is based on hierarchy or a competitive spiritual SAT. It is based on the fact that all of us who enter through this door, we are broken, blessed, bruised, confused, and redeemed. In the words of the psalmist, for those in this digital space, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. We can walk through the archway across this threshold of this door. And for those who may be confused, you need to understand why we can walk through this threshold, why there is no lock on this door, because this is a door of grace. Grace simply means I don't deserve to be here. It's unmerited, unwarranted acts of love. And here I am, pretty much by myself in this space.
We are in one of those moments that demand a poor people's campaign.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
Until we are ready to keep this fight going.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
We can do more. We can do better. And we're building the power.
And so we have to come to a point that every attack on the poor will embolden our agitation.
Rise up. Rise up. Rise up. And join us June 20,
2020.
This land is your land. This land is my land. This land is our land. And together, from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are a new unsettling force. You say that?
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are here.
And we are here.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
For liberation.
For liberation.
And we got nothing to lose.
And we got nothing to lose.
But our chains.
But our chains.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling force, and we're here.